I'm 56 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had everything figured out. I married young, raised 2 daughters, built a stable life in upstate New York. Love, to me, was a quiet, dependable thing, routine, comfortable, the kind that doesn't ask too many questions. I never chased passion or mystery. I stayed grounded, predictable. But then, one quiet afternoon, while I was still in bed, sipping tea and scrolling through old photos, my son-in-law walked through my front door without knocking. And what he told me in that moment changed everything. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please, don't make the same mistake I did. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky hangs low and gray, and the sound of the drops against the windows makes it hard to leave the warmth of the covers. My husband was out of town, had left 2 days earlier for a golf retreat in Pennsylvania. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I was taking full advantage of the quiet. At my age, solitude is a rare kind of luxury. I was still in bed, propped up with pillows, wearing my favorite blue flannel robe that had seen better days. I had just brewed a cup of chamomile tea and set it on the nightstand when I heard the front door creak open. My first thought was that it was my daughter, maybe stopping by with groceries or one of the grandkids. But when I heard the familiar voice call out, "Mom, you home?" I froze. It was Daniel, my son-in-law. He was married to my youngest, Jenna. They'd been together for 7 years, ever since college. Daniel was the type of man mothers dream of for their daughters. Steady, respectful, thoughtful, always smiling, always helping. But I also knew, deep down, that something had shifted between him and Jenna over the past year. I didn't pry. It wasn't my place. But I noticed the way his eyes lingered when she spoke to him, as if he was searching for something she no longer gave him. I called out, "I'm upstairs," and scrambled to close the top of my robe a little more snugly. I was still pulling my hair into a loose ponytail when I heard him on the stairs. Heavy footsteps, slower than usual. "Sorry to drop in like this," he said softly as he reached the doorway. He didn't step in right away. He hovered, one hand on the doorframe, the other clutching a grocery bag. "I brought you some of those oat muffins you like. The bakery on Maple had them fresh today." I smiled. "That's sweet of you, Daniel. Come in, come in." He looked around the room for a moment, as if he wasn't sure whether it was okay to enter. Then he stepped in and set the bag on the dresser. Something about him felt off. His usual lightness, the boyish grin, the eager-to-please energy, it was all gone. He looked tired, older, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a while. "Is Jenna with you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He sat down slowly in the armchair by the window, shaking his head. "No, she's with her friend Meredith today. Yoga and brunch or something." There was a long pause. I sipped my tea and watched him. Everything okay? He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw a vulnerability in his eyes that startled me. "Can I ask you something, just as a person? Not as your son-in-law?" I nodded, my heart beginning to thud a little harder in my chest. "What do you do when you feel like the person you married stopped seeing you a long time ago?" His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I put my tea down and leaned forward. "Daniel." "I'm sorry," he said quickly, shaking his head. "That was unfair. I shouldn't." "No, it's okay." I paused, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes we don't realize how lonely we are until we say it out loud. He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to cry or laugh. "I love her," he whispered. I really do. But lately, it feels like I'm living with a roommate. She's always distracted, on her phone, talking about everything but us. I feel like I'm fading. The room was quiet except for the steady tap of rain on the windows. I reached out instinctively, placing a hand over his. It was a small gesture, meant to comfort. But the moment our skin touched, something unspoken passed between us. I felt the heat of it in my palm, and in a sudden shift in his breath. His eyes met mine, wide, uncertain, searching. I shouldn't have come, he said, starting to pull his hand away. But I didn't let go right away. And that was the beginning, the precise moment where something unthinkable began to stir, something neither of us had expected, nor knew how to name. We sat there in silence, my hand still on his, the room thick with a tension that neither of us dared to break. Not yet. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I went about my chores like usual, washed the linens, trimmed the hydrangeas, made a chicken pot pie, just because it was cloudy and felt like comfort food. But all the while, my mind kept drifting back to Daniel. His voice, the sadness in it, the weight his hand felt under mine, the hesitation in his eyes when he looked at me. And the worst part, I didn't feel guilty. At least, not in the way I thought I would. I told myself it was just a moment, a strange, charged moment born out of vulnerability. He needed comfort. I gave it. That's all. Nothing happened. Except something asterisk had asterisk happened. We both felt it. And we both left it hanging there in the air between us. That night I lay in bed with the windows open, the breeze cool on my skin, my husband's side of the bed still untouched. The stillness of the house crept into me like a whisper, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself thinking about my own loneliness, about how many quiet nights I'd spent just like this, waiting for something I couldn't name. The next morning, just after 11, I heard the doorbell ring. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there. Same jacket, same tired eyes. But this time, he was holding a small box, wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with a thin piece of twine. I just wanted to drop this off, he said. I stepped aside to let him in. You didn't have to. I know, he interrupted, his voice low. But I wanted to. He followed me into the kitchen. I offered him coffee. He nodded. I busied myself at the counter, and when I turned around to hand him the mug, he was holding out the box. It's nothing big, he said. Just something that reminded me of you. I slowly undid the twine and peeled the paper back. Inside was a worn paperback copy of a book I hadn't seen in years. Asterisk, The Bridges of Madison County. Asterisk, my eyes widened. I remember you mentioned it once, he said. Said it made you cry when you read it the first time. I ran my fingers over the cover. I was younger then. I didn't understand it fully. Maybe now you do, he said quietly. I met his eyes. And again the room filled with that thick, lingering stillness. He set his mug down and leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. Can I be honest with you? You always can, I said, though my heart had already begun to speed up. I came here yesterday hoping for comfort, he said. But I left feeling confused, not because of you, but because something inside me woke up, something I thought I'd buried. I swallowed hard. Daniel, I know what this looks like, and I know it's not fair to you, but I can't pretend that what I felt wasn't real. That asterisk isn't asterisk real. I stepped closer. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to close the space between us to test whether the charge I felt was imagined or mutual. I've spent years feeling invisible, I whispered. First as a wife, then as a mother. Even now, I look in the mirror and sometimes don't recognize myself. His eyes softened. I see you. The words hit me harder than I expected. And just like that, I reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear, nervous, uncertain, exposed. He didn't move toward me. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. The silence between us was asterisk the touch. The space was already humming with something fragile and electric. I'm not asking for anything, he said. I just needed you to know. I nodded. I know. He stepped back, gently picked up his mug, and took another sip before setting it down again. I should go. As he walked to the door, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. Thanks for the coffee. And for listening. When the door clicked shut behind him, I stood alone in the kitchen, the book still in my hands. The lines between right and wrong hadn't just blurred, they'd vanished. And in their place was something deeper, more dangerous. A connection I hadn't asked for, and yet couldn't bring myself to resist. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope over water I couldn't see the bottom of. Daniel didn't come by again right away, but I felt his presence everywhere. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart fluttered, hoping, dreading. Every time I passed by the book he gave me, sitting untouched on the side table, I felt a mix of longing and guilt tighten in my chest. I hadn't told anyone. Not Jenna, not even my closest friend, Carol. It wasn't just about protecting Daniel. It was about preserving something that felt too raw, too delicate to expose to the world. Whatever had stirred between us hadn't erupted into scandal. No lines had been crossed in action, but in thought. I knew we'd already stepped over. That Friday evening, the sky turned lavender and orange as the sun dipped below the trees. I was watering the plants on the porch, trying to quiet the restless noise inside me, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I didn't need to look. I knew it was him. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, his hands deep in his pockets. There was no smile this time, just a long, unreadable look. "Can we talk?" he asked. I set the watering can down slowly. Of course. We sat side by side on the porch swing. The wood creaked softly beneath us. The air was thick with honeysuckle and tension. "I didn't plan for this," he began. "You probably think I'm selfish, that I'm looking for something I shouldn't be." "I don't think that," I said quietly. "I think you're hurting. And I think maybe I am too." He turned to face me. "It's not just about being hurt. I come here, and I feel safe, seen, like I can breathe. And I don't feel that way anywhere else." His words landed heavy in my chest. I hadn't told anyone, but my marriage had long been a quiet shadow of itself. My husband and I loved each other, yes, but in a distant, well-worn way. The kind of love that didn't ask questions anymore. We'd stopped touching with curiosity, stopped looking at each other like people who still had something to discover. I looked at Daniel, this young man, my daughter's husband, and saw someone who was still searching. And somehow, in his presence, I began to search again too. "I can't promise you anything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I won't be the reason a marriage falls apart." He nodded, understanding. "I'm not asking you to. But you have to be honest with Jenna, with yourself. You can't just keep coming here, hoping I'll give you something she won't." There was a long silence. "I've thought about talking to her," he said, "but I don't know if she'll care. We've been drifting for so long. I think she's already let go." He reached over then, Not forcefully, just a gentle brush of his hand against mine, a simple human touch. And I didn't pull away. We sat like that for a while. The sky turned darker. A few stars blinked awake. Eventually, he stood. I should go. As he reached the steps, he turned back. I know this can't go on like this, but thank you for not pushing me away. He walked back into the night, and I remained on the porch swing, the scent of damp earth rising as dew settled on the grass. I felt like a woman standing in the middle of a bridge, not quite on one side, not ready to cross fully to the other. And beneath me was the current of something powerful, something I hadn't felt in years. Desire, yes. But more than that, being known, being wanted, being awakened. I didn't know where this would lead, but I knew I couldn't go back to sleep. It was a quiet Sunday morning when everything changed. I had just come back from the market, the early sun warming the driveway as I unloaded groceries from the back seat. Birds chirped in the maple trees, and the world felt deceptively ordinary. Safe, even. I didn't expect to see Daniel's car pull in behind mine. He stepped out slowly, his face drawn but resolved. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He walked up the path with a purpose that immediately put me on edge. "I need to talk to you," he said as I met him on the porch. There was something different in his eyes. Not uncertainty this time, just wait. We sat inside at the kitchen table. The house smelled faintly of lemons and cinnamon. I hadn't even had a chance to put the milk away. "I told her," he said plainly. I blinked. "Jenna?" He nodded. "I didn't mention you. I just told her I wasn't happy, that I couldn't keep pretending, that we've both changed, and maybe we've been afraid to admit it." I sat back in my chair, my hands resting still in my lap. "She took it better than I expected," he added after a long pause. "She cried. Then she said she already knew." Those words sent something through me. Not relief exactly, but a kind of trembling release, like a knot in my chest had quietly come undone. "I don't know what happens next," he said. "But I do know that pretending we're okay just because it's easy isn't fair to either of us." I reached across the table, gently taking his hand. "You did the right thing." "I didn't come here expecting anything," he said, eyes fixed on our fingers. I needed you to know that something real happened between us. And whether it ever becomes anything more or not, I won't pretend it didn't matter." His voice was raw, honest, the kind of honesty that leaves no room for fantasy. And that was the moment I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't a story about forbidden passion or stolen affection. This was a story about two people, two lonely, drifting people, finding clarity in an unexpected connection. I didn't rush to give him an answer. I didn't offer promises or ultimatums. I simply nodded and said, "Thank you for telling me." He stayed for a little while longer. We talked about small things, his job, a book I was reading, whether the fall colors would be strong this year. The intensity between us had shifted into something quieter, steadier. When he finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He hesitated in the doorway. Whatever this was, or might be, I'm grateful for it. I smiled softly. So am I. Then he left. No kiss. No grand gesture. Just a man walking away with honesty, and a woman left standing in her own truth. That evening, I took The Bridges of Madison County from the shelf. I ran my fingers along the spine, then opened to the first page. And as I read, I saw myself differently, not as a woman caught in something reckless, but as someone who had remembered her worth, her desires, her right to be seen. Love doesn't always come wrapped in perfect packages. Sometimes it arrives in moments, in realizations, in quiet afternoons when the truth finally steps forward and asks to be heard. I don't know what the future holds, but I know now I'm not afraid of it anymore.